In the shadow corners of history, some figures pass as mere footnotes, their names whispered in fear and then forgotten. Others, despite their desire for shadows, carve their deeds into the very stones of the ages. And this is a chronicle of one such soul, known to the annals only as the Unnamed the Third, who would bear the dark curse of the clan Bali. She was a creature of contradictions, a being defined by a timid, retiring nature, yet possessed of a cruelty that could chill the most hardened heart. Her journey is not one of glorious battle or of noble titles, but of schemes hatched in darkness, of whispered words and brutal hidden truths. This is the story of how her shy and sadistic nature shaped the world around her, one hesitant, bloody step at a time. And in the annals of the damned, lineage is everything, and a vampire sire is their creator, their teacher, their curse all in one, and this bond is far deeper and more permanent than a simple blood loyalty of a ghoul, and to create a child is to form a new link in the chain. It is an act of profound creation, and for the Unnamed and her reviled clan, it has now become an obsession for any tempting fate or human that would pass her eye, and her band was a traveling camp, a collection of tents and rough-hewn followers, not of the grand courts. And in the transient world, power was not inherited, it was taken. And her gaze had fallen upon a renowned scholar by the name of Ibn, a man whose intellect she believed could elevate her status further in the true power of the shadows, and to turn her would be another stone in her ambition itself. And the desert winds whipped sand against the canvas of her command tent, and she stood hunched over a mat, and across from her, a visiting authority, of course, that would make her skin crawl, was Duke Anazir of Palmyra, a fellow Canaanite and an ally of convenience. His power was well established in the area and his confidence absolute, and his presence would fill the tent and make her feel small and awkward, and she would fight often the urges of reflecting a presence of dominance and more so embody her shyness. She would fight the urge, though, to stare at the ground and force herself to speak. Ibn's mind, it is a rare treasure. Bringing him to us and making him one of us, it will be a significant victory, and the risk I am willing to pay. A treasure, you say? Or a liability? The scholar thinks, and he questions, this is not a desirable trait in a child. Are you certain you can control what you can create? He doubts me. They always do. I am certain he will serve our cause. The conversation was interrupted by the hulking man Gregory the Evil, a crude but useful member of the band, and his knuckles were scarred and he smelled of sweat. The Unnamed disliked his loudness, his lack of grace, but of course he was still a valuable member. My lady, a word. There's desert traders and mouthy fellows camped a few miles to the east, and they have loads of silken coin. And 100 gold says we can make him and his goods disappear. The Unnamed's nature would recoil from Gregory's brutish energy, and her soul sang at the thought of the trader's fear. But her mind, of course, saw an opportunity, and the embrace was a costly process, and her coffers would always remain low. Ah, yes, that would be enough for the ritual supplies, enough to secure Ibn in full. This filth can be useful. Gregory, let's go. Hostile acquisitions are necessary. We will support this. See to the details. And as she left, a grunt escaping his lips, the Unnamed felt a small thrill. For this was her strength, not grand commands, but quiet actions, turning her violent rages of others into the profits for herself. But the desert was a dangerous place, and not all threats could be managed with golden whispers. Days later, while scouting the lands on a hunt, the Unnamed found herself in a situation that her quiet plotting could not prevent. She would move with grace, a shadow among the dunes, when the glints of the setting sun on the steel would catch her eye. A band of local men, their faces wrapped in cloth to ward off the sand, had formed a militia, and they carried sharp scythes and swords, and they were monster hunters, and they were looking for her. Spread out! The shepherd said the demons hunt in these hills till dusk. Find it before it finds our flock. Of course, as she tried to melt back into the shadows, it was too late, and one of them had spotted her. There, by the rocks! Panic would seize her, not fear of them, but fear of being seen and known. And shouts would echo across the sands as they called for reinforcements. And this was the beginning of an annoyance that would spiral into the full-scale assault. And her plans for even her operation could be jeopardized by these mortals. She wanted to flee, but she knew that there was only one solution against a band of angry peasants. They cannot be allowed to report back, and this must end now. The historical records, written in her own sparse and chilling hand, does not linger on the details, but just simply state that the threat was neutralized. The shouting went, and the desert fell silent, and the hunters were gone, and it was another lesson to those who would try to hunt that which they did not understand. And as she returned to her camp, the entire encounter would leave a bitter taste. She was powerful, yes, but her band was small, and a larger group could easily overwhelm them with enough numbers. We are not strong enough. She pouts as wiping herself from the sands. We have cleverness, but not enough swords. Not enough knights. I rely on brutes and shadows, and this is a weakness I must correct. And it would be this fresh awareness on her own vulnerabilities that she would soon find many targets. Settling boundary disputes. On her quest, Duke Enazir would accompany her, his presence a constant judging reminder of her own status in these lands. And the source, of course, of her all pings would be a stubborn camel that would refuse to move. My lady, my apologies, said the merchant. Noble Duke, he will not budge. And the Unnamed would stare at this beast, looking at her with blank eyes. A trivial matter, but after the fight with the hunters, it felt like another challenge. It seems even the beasts of the desert do not respect you. Perhaps a firmer hand is needed to lead, chuckled Duke Enazir. And of course, this would be the final straw. The Duke's condescending tone, the public setting, the dumb camel. It was enough of a storm that the control that she had fought so hard to maintain would slip, and the beast inside her would rage, and the world would turn red. Your beast needs to learn some manners. But she did not move towards the camel. No, her rage was too vast and explosive. She turned, and with a scream of pure fury, she slammed her fist into the nearby crate. And the wood, reinforced with iron bands, would explode into splinters, and the camel shrieked and bolted, and the merchant would fall to his knees in terror. And in a moment of silence, the Duke would stare at her, his amusement gone, replaced by the cold look of a calculating appraisal. He had seen the monster she had caged. The Unnamed what stood panting, her knuckles already healing, and the shame and fear fading, the echo of her rage. She had shown her hand and revealed her lack of control. And in the humiliation, in a desperate attempt to reassert her authority, she decided the time to wait would soon be over. And the frenzy had shaken her, but it had filled her with resolve. And she could not afford to be seen as a beast. And she would complete her work and would embrace Ibing. The scholar would be brought to her tent, a man whose face was lined with wisdom. He had been lured here with the promise of forbidden knowledge. And now the secret was going to be revealed. And she would begin the ritual, her hands trembling and the words of the curse catching in her throat. But the tent flap would be thrown open and Duke Anazir stood there, his face a mask of stone. And with him her nephew, the one who she had recently taken control of the dynasty, his eyes burning. Haha, Aunt! Your taste of mortals is truly underwhelming. You really shouldn't try to bring such filth as this man into our ranks. Ah, I've done you the favor of raising your standards, said Duke Anazir. He is weak, and we cannot afford weakness. The Unnamed would stand frozen, and her shy nature would be overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of their intrusion. It would seem like her plan was crumbling before her eyes, and the Duke would take a step forward towards the scholar, his shadow falling over the old man. Ibn could not even understand or comprehend the moments that were ongoing, and the Duke's cold eyes would look in the Unnamed's face, and he would raise his hand, and his fingers would be curled as a dark promise would hang in the air. The moments that define us rarely triumph, and more often they are failures sharp and absolute. There are moments when carefully laid plans shatters and ambitions turn to ash. And for the Unnamed, this moment came into the tent, and under the cold eyes of the Duke and her nephew, with the life of her chosen hanging in the balance, the air was thick with the scent of betrayal and the chilling weight of her own powerlessness. And it was a test that she could not pass. And with quiet cunning, it was a lesson that would be written in blood. And Anazir, the Duke of Palmyra, looked down upon the scholar Ibn, and his face was unreadable. And the Unnamed's nephew would stand beside him with a venomous smile. And the Unnamed wanted to scream and unleash the beast. But the memory of the shame was a cold chain around her heart. And she was forced to stand silent and witness the destruction of her ambition. Weakness is a disease, said Duke Anazir. The only cure is to cut it out. And he did not raise his hand in any kind of grand gesture, but it was brutally simple. With the focused, hardened edge of his hand, he struck Ibn right through his heart. And it was a crack that broke through his spine, and the scholar crumpled. And in her quest of pursuing more knowledge, his own blood now a pool on the dusty floor. And the Duke looked at his hand and then at the Unnamed. And in his gaze would be a final warning. And he and the nephew would leave the tent, leaving her alone with the corpse and the ruins of her own dreams. The Unnamed would not move for a while, and the rage there would be a white hot coal in her chest. But it was caged, and a new feeling was growing. It was a terrifying, clear resolve, and it was her desire to create something perfect. A nest, a companion that she could share something with. A mortal vanity in this world of monsters will be a pure flaw, and power will be the only thing that matters. And a great chide wouldn't mean anything but the tangible powers of followers in steel. And the Unnamed would make a vow to herself. Never again. I will never again be this weak. And I will never place my fate in the hands of one. And I will build my own strength, one piece at a time. And this vow that she would swear would be the founding of her own sacred order. And the dream of expanding her own chide had died. And that pragmatic architect of power would be birthed through this death. And her focus would shift from the gaining of a single to the quality and quantity of many. And her band would need to be cultivated. Her band and her order would need something more darker and stronger from within. In this company that traveled on the road, she could not trust all and would need to lean on others to accomplish her goals. And as they were traveling along the paths, they had to decide whether to go through the mountain pass or along the safer route. And Nosteron would speak. The direct path is the warrior's path, my sire. We can punch through any resistance and be done with this land. And Al-Latif would shake his head. A warrior's path is often a fool's errand, and our sire's genius lies in our command of the unexpected. The safer, longer road is the wiser one. It preserves our strength. The Unnamed would offer no explanation and simply point towards the mountain, and as they would travel, she would acquire many brooches in the long new journey and win many events and pockets of money. The safer path would prevent casualties, for her herds needed to be maintained for her thirst for blood. And soon, while she would be camped, whispers would arrive from the east, a political earthquake that would shake the rival clans to its core. And in the commands of the tent, Ab would brief the Unnamed Nosteron. My sire, it is a house divided. The Banu Hakim, the dreaded assassins of the Alamut, are breaking apart, and 5 factions sharpen their daggers for this war in the shadows. The fanatical web of knives, the pious Ashira, the moderate council of scrolls, the traditionalist Sakari, and the heretical lost tribe. And Nosteron with the angry and hungry glint. A clan of assassins turning on itself? Good. It will be a river of blood, and a river in which we can fish for power and territory. It is a vacuum, my sire, said Ab. A shift in the great jihad that will create chaos for centuries. And your insight into this will be our guiding light. And in her own thoughts, the Unnamed sat and listened. And she saw their perspectives, the sword and the book. This chaos, of course, between the two of them was a gift. A storm under a smaller, more disciplined predator who would be able to hunt unnoticed. And it was in this chaotic landscape that she would find many more pieces. And it would be a wandering knight that was skilled with the blade, and she would bring him into his element. The fact that you have some skill means you are worth keeping. She would find people like these and bring her into the fold, but to not get too distracted from the thoughts. The bringings of these 5 clans, the web of knives, a mastery of assassination and targets, and then the pirate Ashira attached to the old ways and pursuing a path of going with Allah, and the count of scrolls operating with their own aims, and the heretical lost tribe, maybe an ancient Zoroastrian band. Who knows what they were thinking? And in the midst of this, she would look back at her collection of people, warriors, scholars, and spies. But of course, it was not her true power base. And the Unnamed, measuring herself, knew that the ultimate strength could not just stem from her, but from the followers, and from a secret core, and a mind to direct the sword of her men. And she needed a will that would guide the chaos. And she had to forge a chain of loyalty invisible to all but those who wore it. And she needed her first link. And it would be inside her tent, late at night as the camp grew silent. The spy Gregory would be asleep, and Nosteron would be in the distance, practicing her blade work under the moon, completely unawares that her sire was going to make a move that would forever change the eternal power structure. And the Unnamed would summon one person, Ab al-Latif, and he would enter the tent, his expression of solemn curiosity. She would gesture him to sit and speak with a conspiratorial whisper. Your mind, my dear scholar, has been a greater asset to me than 1,000 swords, and you see patterns that others miss. And you understood my war when even I had not given it a name. You had healed many on our trips and still continue to provide support. And Ab would bow. You are the Grandmaster, my sire. I am merely a student, privileged to observe the games you play. But even a Grandmaster needs a confidant, and the plans I must now make, and the paths I must now walk, they require a deep understanding that few possess. Nosteron is perfect, loyal and sharp, but her vision is fixed on the battlefield. And I require one whose vision is fixed on the soul, on history and the very nature of power. I am creating a coven. She locks her eyes with his. An inner circle of one. Our work must be shielded from all other eyes, and our plans must be our own. And what is said between us can never be repeated, not even to your sister in my blood. This was the greatest honor that he could imagine. It would confirm his deepest beliefs that he was the one who could truly comprehend her. My sire, I am yours to command in all things. This secret society needs a name, one that speaks of its purpose. And we are the whispers in the dark, the doubt in the hearts of our enemies. We will be the terrible unknown. The pact would be sealed. And to Ab, it will be the birth of a new order. And with him, as his most first trusted cleric, he will be the keeper of his goddess's true mind. And in her own thoughts, a cool smile would blossom in the privacy of her soul. Yes, he will be the perfect foundation. His mind craves order and purpose, and I will give it to him. He will build the framework and write the doctrines, and manage the logistics of the cult I must create. He believes he is my confidant, and in truth, he is the first stone in a temple being built to a god who does not yet exist, and he will be my first prior. In the harsh meritocracy of a traveling war band, new titles can be weapons in themselves, and Ab had been publicly named the head prior of the Unnamed order. To the camp, it was an official, if vaguely defined role. To Nosteron, it was the empty puffery of an old man given a fancy hat. But to the Unnamed and Ab, it was the perfect cover, and a public mass for the secret work of their coven of two, the terrible unknown. And we would open around amongst the campfire. Nosteron would be sharpening her blade, casting annoyed glances as Ab, who is reviewing scrolls, and the Unnamed glides into their presence, her expression unreadable. Our coffers are low. There is a local stewardess nearby, wealthy and careless. We will rob her. and Nosteron would be instantly energized. She looked up from her whetstone, a cruel smile on her lips. A simple mugging? Excellent! A direct solution to a direct problem. My blade is thirsty. And Ob would look with an expression that was thoughtful rather than judgmental. An interesting choice, my sire, to risk exposure for such a mundane reward. I trust your grand design sees a larger purpose in this venture. Ah, yes. And she would watch them, her two perfect opposing tools. He is learning. He no longer questions the what and only seeks the why. And he sees the design, and so he shall have one. The truth is simpler. The robbery is not the goal, it is the method, and I must learn how to manipulate the fabrics of the mortal world and pull the threads here. This is my lesson in how I will be a master, and the gold is merely a bonus. And as the scene shifts, the plan will be put in motion, but it is of course clumsy. The Unnamed's followers are not suited for delicate work as it seems, and their attempts would be discovered immediately. And they will be forced to retreat empty-handed, and their presence in the area now known. Ugh! Nosteron would shout, pacing in the camp. A failure? We were discovered like common bandits. We never should have used overwhelming force. Alas, I am a terrible criminal. The Unnamed thinks. My pieces are not yet skilled for this game, but the failure is educational. And I saw how their watch responds. I learned their schedules, and I planted a seed of fear. The lesson was not a failure, even if the crime was. But while the Unnamed used petty crime as a training ground for her cult, her head prior was engaged in a more dangerous form of research. And at her direction, Ob had been tasked with finding a crack in the monolithic wall of the Banu Hakim, seeking any information that might lead to the truth of his sire's path. And later, in the privacy of the Unnamed's tent, Ob would unroll a map, his expression grim. For this was a secret coven meeting under the guise of a head prior's report. My sire, my inquiries have borne fruit, and it is as dangerous as it is enlightening. And to understand the Banu Hakim, one must understand their three castes. For nobody truly knows when the caste system took hold. But in the Banu Hakim, it is now an integral part of their own life. And traditionally, the viziers were the leaders, the most politically active caste. But in more recent times, their power has slowly shifted into the hands of the warriors. And the sorcerers, for their part, have long been a reclusive lot, their small numbers making them the weakest of the castes. And this system works alongside the political factions, with some castes favoring certain agendas over others. This is a web we must navigate, and I believe our hope for information lies with the Vizier caste. Their currency is knowledge, not blood. They may have records, histories, something that mentions a being of your description, but approaching any of them is a risk, and we would be inserting ourselves into their ancient, bloody politics. We are here for information only, says the Unnamed. We will not be drawn into wars, we will not choose a side. It would be a fatal distraction. And to be known by them as a target, says in her internal thoughts. My very existence is a threat to their stability, and I must remain a ghost to them, even as I sift through their history for my own. Continue your work, my head prior. Find me a vizier we can approach, one whose discretion can be bought or coerced. Be the whisper I need you to be, but do not, under any circumstance, let the larger clans know who you serve. And with that, Ab gives a bow, accepting his mission. For he is the secret mind of the Coven, and will gather intelligence that will shape their future, while Nostaron the Sword would remain blissfully unaware, still believing their greatest struggles will be fought with steel in the back alleys. The Unnamed watches him go, her own path clearer than ever, and she will use her scholar to unravel the secrets of her past, and her warrior to fund her expedition, and all while molding herself into the cult master who could one day command all the world and send it into the hellfire it deserves.